The shots echoed through the canyon as Catherine Sinclair ducked behind the overturned stagecoach, her heart hammering against her ribs. Blood trickled from a scratch on her cheek where a bullet had grazed her moments earlier. 3 days into her journey west, and she was about to die in the middle of nowhere, 1879 Arizona territory. Hand over the strongbox, and maybe we'll let the lady live. The harsh voice of the bandit leader carried over the sound of nervous horses and the groans of the wounded driver. Catherine clutched the small derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. The driver was unconscious, the shotgun guard already dead, and the other passengers, an elderly couple, were huddled beside her, the old man's arm protectively around his weeping wife. Catherine had only 6 bullets, and she'd counted at least 5 bandits. The thunder of approaching hoofbeats made her tense further. More bandits. But the new arrival was met with a volley of shots from the outlaws. "It's Easton Xavier," one of the bandits shouted in alarm. Catherine peered around the edge of the stagecoach. A tall figure on horseback was weaving through the rocks, returning fire with deadly precision. One bandit fell, then another. The remaining 3 mounted their horses and fled, disappearing into the maze of rock formations. The horseman approached cautiously, rifle still ready. Catherine raised her derringer. "I mean no harm," the man said, his voice low and steady. He dismounted, keeping his movements slow. "Name's Easton Xavier. I patrol these parts." Catherine lowered her weapon slightly, taking in his appearance. Tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair was partially hidden beneath a worn Stetson, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. "Catherine Sinclair," she replied. "Are they gone?" "For now. They're Denton's gang. Been terrorizing these routes for months." He checked the driver's pulse. "He'll live, but we need to get him to town." "Sloan is still a day's journey," the elderly man said, his voice quavering. Easton nodded. "My cabin's closer, about 3 miles from here. We can tend to the wounded there, then I'll escort you all to Sloan tomorrow." Catherine hesitated. A stranger's cabin in the wilderness wasn't what she had in mind when she'd left Boston, but the alternatives were limited. "The horses can still pull," Easton continued, examining the stagecoach. "I'll right this thing, and we'll move slowly." With efficient movements, he harnessed his own horse to help, and together they managed to right the stagecoach. The elderly couple, the Johnsons, Catherine learned, helped her move the injured driver inside. Easton retrieved the dead guard's body, covering it respectfully before securing it to the roof. "I'll ride alongside," he told Catherine as she prepared to board. "Keep watch." "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. Something passed between them, a moment of connection that surprised her with its intensity. As they traveled the rough trail to Easton's cabin, Catherine found herself watching him. There was something solitary about him, a distance in his eyes that suggested he was a man accustomed to his own company. Yet he'd risked his life for strangers without hesitation. Easton's cabin appeared as the sun began its descent, a sturdy structure nestled against a rock face, with a corral for horses and a small garden plot. It was simple but well-maintained, the work of a man who took pride in self-sufficiency. "It's not much," he said as he helped Catherine down from the coach, "but it's safe." Inside, the cabin was neat and sparse: a stone fireplace, a table with chairs, shelves of books that surprised Catherine, a separate sleeping area partially concealed by a curtain, and a loft accessible by ladder. The few personal touches were practical rather than decorative. A guitar in the corner, a carved chess set on a small table, sketches of landscapes pinned to one wall. While Easton tended to the driver, Catherine helped Mrs. Johnson prepare a simple meal from Easton's stores. The older woman worked silently, occasionally dabbing at tears. "We were heading to our son's ranch," she explained when she caught Catherine watching. "First time we've been west, I never thought." Her voice trailed off. "We're alive," Catherine said gently. "Thanks to Mr. Xavier." Later, as they ate stew around the table, Easton remained vigilant, his eyes frequently moving to the windows. The driver had regained consciousness, but was in considerable pain from a bullet lodged in his shoulder. "I've sent up a smoke signal," Easton told them. "Friend of mine checks for it daily. Apache fellow named Thomas. He's got more medical knowledge than me, should be here by morning." "You know Apache signals?" Mr. Johnson asked warily. "Grew up with them nearby, learned a few things." Easton's tone discouraged further questions. When it came time to sleep, Easton insisted the Johnsons take his bed. The injured driver was settled near the fire, and Catherine was given the loft. Easton himself took a bedroll outside, despite Catherine's protests. "I sleep better under the stars anyway, Miss Sinclair," he said with the first hint of a smile she'd seen from him. In the morning, Catherine woke to voices. Looking down from the loft, she saw Easton speaking with a Native American man, Thomas, presumably. They conversed with the ease of old friends, switching occasionally between English and what Catherine assumed was Apache. Thomas skillfully removed the bullet from the driver's shoulder and dressed the wound with herbs and bandages. Throughout the procedure, he told stories that made even the stoic Easton laugh, tales of their shared youth and adventures. "Your friend is quite the healer," Catherine remarked to Easton as Thomas prepared a medicinal tea. "Best tracker and healer in the territory," Easton agreed. "Saved my life more than once." Thomas caught her eye. "Someone needed to keep this troublemaker alive," he said with a grin. "The spirits weren't ready for him yet." Thomas stayed through midday, then departed with a promise to send word to Sloan about the attack. The driver, though weak, was recovering well enough that Easton felt confident about traveling the next day. That evening, as Mrs. Johnson rested and the men played chess, Catherine explored Easton's bookshelves. They held an eclectic collection: practical guides to survival and farming, histories of the West, novels by Dickens and Twain, even poetry. "You're an educated man, Mr. Xavier," she observed, running her fingers along the spines. "Just because a man lives in the wilderness doesn't mean his mind has to be wild too," he replied without looking up from the chessboard. "Your move, Johnson." Later, as Catherine helped clean up after supper, she found herself alone with Easton. "May I ask why you're traveling to Sloan?" he inquired, drying a plate she handed him. "My uncle died and left me his newspaper," she explained. "The Sloan Sentinel." Easton raised an eyebrow. "Old Horace Sinclair was your uncle, you knew him." Everyone in these parts knew Horace, fearless old cuss. Wrote whatever he pleased, consequences be damned. Easton set down the plate. "You planning to run the paper?" "I am." Catherine lifted her chin slightly. "I was a journalist in Boston. Not officially, of course women aren't hired for such positions. But I wrote articles under a male pseudonym for years. Sloan might not be ready for a woman editor." "Then Sloan will have to adapt," she replied firmly. A ghost of a smile touched Easton's lips. "You sound just like your uncle." He studied her for a moment. "The Denton gang might come back, you know. They don't like leaving witnesses." "Are you trying to frighten me, Mr. Xavier?" "Just stating facts, Miss Sinclair. The West isn't Boston. I'm well aware." Catherine met his gaze steadily. "But I've never been one to run from challenges." Something shifted in Easton's expression, respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. He nodded slowly. "Well then, welcome to Arizona territory, Miss Sinclair." The journey to Sloan the next day was mercifully uneventful. The town appeared on the horizon by mid-afternoon. a collection of wooden buildings stretching along a main street with scattered homes and ranches visible in the distance. It wasn't large, but it was more substantial than Catherine had expected. "Town's growing," Easton commented as they approached. "Silver mine opened up last year, brought in new folks." The stagecoach drew attention as it rolled down the main street. People stepped out of shops and saloons to watch, murmuring when they saw the body still strapped to the roof and the bandaged driver. Easton directed them to the sheriff's office, a square building with a small jail attached. Sheriff Parker, a barrel-chested man with a thick mustache, listened gravely to their account of the attack. "Denton's getting bolder," he muttered. "Hitting the stage so close to town." He eyed Catherine. "You must be Horace's niece. He spoke of you." "I hope to continue his work," Catherine replied. "Brave woman," the sheriff remarked, "or foolish, time will tell." He turned to Easton. "Appreciate you bringing them in, Xavier. Don't suppose you'd consider my deputy offer now?" Easton shook his head. "Just doing what anyone would." "Not anyone," Sheriff Parker said meaningfully. "Most would have ridden the other direction hearing gunfire." After giving their statements, the group dispersed. The driver was taken to the doctor. The Johnsons found lodging at the hotel until they could continue to their son's ranch, and Easton helped Catherine locate the Sentinel office. The newspaper office was a modest building with large front windows, currently dusty from disuse. Inside, Catherine found printing equipment, a desk piled with papers, and evidence of her uncle's sudden passing, a half-written article still in the typewriter, a cold cup of coffee on the desk. "He had living quarters upstairs," Easton told her, carrying in her trunk. "Simple but private." Catherine nodded, emotion suddenly tightening her throat. She'd never been particularly close to Uncle Horace, but standing among his possessions made his death real in a way it hadn't been before. Easton seemed to sense her mood. "I'll fetch some supplies from the general store. Things you might need." He paused at the door. "Your uncle was respected here. People trusted his words even when they didn't like them. That's rare." Left alone, Catherine explored what would now be her home and business. The living quarters were indeed simple. A bedroom, a small sitting area, a rudimentary kitchen. But the windows offered a view of the mountains in the distance, painted gold by the setting sun. Despite everything, Catherine felt a sense of rightness. This was where she was meant to be. A knock at the door downstairs interrupted her thoughts. Expecting Easton, she was surprised to find a woman about her own age, carrying a covered dish. "I'm Clara Wilkins," the woman said with a warm smile. "I run the bakery down the street. Thought you might be hungry after your journey." "That's very kind," Catherine said, genuinely touched. "Please come in." Clara set the dish, a savory meat pie, on the desk. "Horace used to print my advertisements for free in exchange for weekly pies. I'd like to continue the arrangement if that suits you." "It suits me very well," Catherine laughed. "I'm afraid I'm a terrible cook." "Most of us here help each other out," Clara explained. "Sloane's growing, but it's still small enough that we look after our own." She glanced around the office. "Will you be continuing the paper?" "Yes." "As soon as I can get organized." "Good. We need a paper, especially with everything that's been happening lately." "What do you mean?" Clara lowered her voice. "The Denton gang has been causing trouble for months, and there are rumors that someone prominent in town might be helping them." She straightened. "Horace was investigating. Some think that's why he died so suddenly." "I was told it was his heart," Catherine said, alarmed. "Maybe it was," Clara shrugged, "but the timing was convenient for some." She headed for the door. "Just be careful what questions you ask, at least until you know who your friends are." After Clara left, Catherine found her uncle's notes in a locked drawer. They detailed suspicious patterns in the stagecoach robberies, suggesting inside information. The last entry, dated the day before his death, mentioned a meeting with someone who claimed to have proof of the conspiracy. Easton returned with supplies and found Catherine deep in her uncle's papers. "You look troubled," he observed, setting down packages. Catherine hesitated, then decided to trust him. She explained what she'd found and what Clara had suggested. Easton's face grew serious. "I'd wondered the same. The Denton gang always seems to know which coaches are carrying valuables." He sat on the edge of the desk. "But accusing someone without proof is dangerous, especially for a newcomer." "I'm not afraid," Catherine insisted. "You should be," Easton said bluntly. "The West has its own justice and it's not always fair. If you start poking into this, you'll make enemies. I'll be careful." Easton studied her. "I'm heading back to my place tomorrow, but I'll be in town in a few days for supplies. I'll check on you then." He paused. "Lock your doors at night." After he left, Catherine couldn't help feeling suddenly alone. But she squared her shoulders and began cleaning the printing press. She had work to do. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Catherine cleaned the office, organized her uncle's affairs, and introduced herself to the townspeople. Most were welcoming, if curious about a woman running a newspaper. She learned that the town council consisted of Mayor Williams, a jovial man who owned the largest saloon, Edward Blackwell, the owner of the silver mine, Judge Hollister, who served the county, and Dr. Miller, who had tended to the stagecoach driver. Catherine also met her uncle's only regular contributor, a retired schoolteacher named Martha Gunderson, who wrote articles about local history and social events. Martha proved to be a valuable source of information about the town and its inhabitants. "Your uncle trusted few people completely," Martha told Catherine as they sorted through old editions of the paper. "But he spoke highly of Easton Xavier, said he was one of the few honest men left in these parts. He seems solitary," Catherine observed. "Has been ever since he came back from the war. Lost his whole family while he was fighting parents to fever sister to an Apache raid. At least that's the story." Martha's eyes twinkled. "Handsome man, though, isn't he?" Catherine felt herself blushing. "I hardly noticed." "Of course not, dear," Martha said with a knowing smile. By the end of the week, Catherine had prepared the first edition of the paper under her management. It included an introduction of herself to the community, local news, and an article about the stagecoach attack, though she was careful not to mention her uncle's suspicions. The day the paper was distributed, Easton returned to town as promised. He found Catherine in the office, setting type for the next edition. "Your newspaper caused quite a stir," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Especially the part where you asked for information about the stagecoach robberies." "Did it?" Catherine didn't look up from her work. "Blackwell wasn't pleased, overheard him complaining at the saloon. The mine owner. Why would he care?" Easton stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Mining payroll goes out on those stages. He's lost money in the robberies." "Or so he claims," Catherine said quietly. Easton's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious implication." "I'm not implying anything yet, just considering possibilities." Their conversation was interrupted by another visitor, Thomas, Easton's Apache friend. "Good to see you again, Miss Sinclair," Thomas greeted her. "I was bringing some herbs to the doctor and thought I would visit my stubborn friend here." His expression grew serious. "I also bring news. The Denton gang was spotted near Yellow Creek. They're looking for someone." "Yellow Creek is just a few miles from here," Easton said, frowning. "The sheriff should be informed," Catherine suggested. "Already done," Thomas assured her. "But I thought you both should know as well." He glanced meaningfully at Easton. "Especially since they were asking about a woman who survived their attack, and about you, my friend." The implication was clear. Catherine was being hunted. "You can't stay here alone," Easton said immediately. "I'm not leaving," Catherine replied firmly. "This is my home now. I didn't suggest leaving, but you need protection." Easton ran a hand through his hair, thinking. "I'll speak with the sheriff about organizing watches." That evening, Sheriff Parker gathered a small group of trusted men, including Easton and Thomas, to discuss security for the town. Catherine insisted on attending, despite objections from some of the men. "The Denton gang has never attacked the town directly," Mayor Williams pointed out. "They stick to the roads." "Until now, they haven't had reason to come into Sloan," Sheriff Parker replied. "But if they're hunting Miss Sinclair—" "I won't be intimidated," Catherine declared. "The paper will continue publishing." "No one's suggesting otherwise," Easton said, "but we need to be practical about your safety." They devised a plan. The sheriff's deputies would increase patrols, trusted citizens would take shifts watching the newspaper office, and Catherine would not travel alone outside of town. "I can stay in Sloan for a while," Easton offered unexpectedly. "Keep an eye on things." Catherine felt oddly touched by the offer. Easton Xavier was clearly a man who valued his solitude, yet he was willing to remain in town, a place he usually avoided for her safety. "I appreciate that," she said softly. The next few days passed tensely, but without incident. Easton took a room at the boarding house and spent much of his time either at the sheriff's office or near the Sentinel. Catherine continued her work, though she was careful to have someone with her when she conducted interviews or gathered news. It was during this time that she began to know Easton better. He would often sit in the newspaper office in the evenings, cleaning his guns or reading while she worked. Their conversations gradually deepened beyond immediate concerns about safety. She learned that he'd fought for the Union, seen horrors at Antietam and Gettysburg, that he'd returned to find his parents dead of fever and his sister killed in a raid, though later he admitted that Thomas's people had not been responsible, despite what others claimed. That he'd wandered for years before settling in his remote cabin, where he occasionally guided hunters or worked as a scout, but mostly kept to himself. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston, losing her parents young, being raised by strict grandparents who disapproved of her interest in journalism. About writing under the name Charles S. Morton for years, building a reputation she couldn't publicly claim. About the relief of receiving her uncle's letter, offering her a chance at a life where she could be herself. "You're braver than most men I know," Easton told her one evening as they shared coffee after she'd finished the next edition's layout. "Not brave," Catherine replied. "Just stubborn." "A quality I'm familiar with," he said with a rare smile. Their growing closeness did not go unnoticed in the small town. Clara teased Catherine about her handsome protector, and even the sheriff made a comment about Easton finally finding something worth coming to town for. Catherine tried to dismiss these insinuations, but she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when Easton entered a room, or the way their hands sometimes lingered when passing objects between them. She was distracted from these confusing feelings, however, by a discovery that changed everything. While researching an article about the silver mines expansion, Catherine found discrepancies in the shipping records she'd obtained from the stage line office. The robbery patterns matched perfectly with shipments that had been documented but later amended in the official records, as if someone was trying to hide which shipments had actually contained silver. She took her findings to Easton and the sheriff. After examining the records, Sheriff Parker whistled low. "This suggests someone at the mine or the stage office is feeding information to Denton," he said. "But it could be anyone with access to these records." "Not anyone," Catherine argued. "Someone who benefits from the stolen silver disappearing from the official record." "Blackwell," Easton said grimly. We can't accuse a town council member without solid proof, the sheriff warned. He's a powerful man with powerful friends. Then we need to get proof, Catherine insisted. They formulated a risky plan. The sheriff would spread word of a large silver shipment leaving on Friday's stagecoach. In reality, the stage would carry only a small amount of silver as bait, while being heavily guarded by deputies and volunteers posing as regular passengers. Meanwhile, Easton and Thomas would follow at a distance, ready to track the bandits back to wherever they took the silver and hopefully to whoever was receiving it. The trap was set. What they didn't anticipate was Catherine's determination to be part of it. "Absolutely not," Easton said firmly when she announced her intention to ride on the stage. "It's too dangerous." "I'm already in danger," Catherine pointed out, "and I need to see this through. It was my uncle's last investigation, and now it's mine." Despite strong objections from both Easton and the sheriff, Catherine was ultimately allowed to join the stage as a passenger, her derringer hidden in her bag. The other passengers included 2 deputies dressed as businessmen and a local rancher who had volunteered. The stagecoach departed Sloan on a clear Friday morning. Easton and Thomas had left hours earlier, taking hidden positions along the likely ambush routes. The plan was for the stage to appear vulnerable, but put up enough resistance to make the bandits flee with only the small bait shipment, allowing Easton and Thomas to track them. For the first hour, the journey was uneventful. The conversation in the coach was minimal, everyone tense with anticipation. Catherine kept her gaze out the window, watching the landscape change as they moved further from town. When the attack came, it was swift and violent. 6 riders surrounded the stage at a narrow pass, guns drawn, faces concealed by bandanas. The driver, one of the sheriff's men, stopped the coach as planned. "Everyone out," one of the bandits shouted. "Hands where we can see them." The passengers complied, the deputies keeping their hidden weapons ready. Catherine's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The leader of the gang approached, his eyes widening with recognition as he saw Catherine. "Well, look who we have here. The lady from the last job." His voice carried a menacing edge. "Boss said you might be trouble." Before anyone could react, shots rang out from the rocks above. One of the bandits fell from his horse. The others returned fire wildly, unable to see where the shots had come from. The deputies used the distraction to draw their weapons. Chaos erupted. Catherine ducked behind the stagecoach wheel as bullets flew in all directions. She saw one deputy go down, then the rancher. The driver was exchanging fire with 2 bandits, while the remaining deputy was pinned down behind a boulder. Through the confusion, Catherine spotted Easton moving stealthily through the rocks, closing in on the bandits from behind. Thomas was somewhere on the other side, his rifle keeping several outlaws pinned down. The leader of the gang seemed to realize they were outmaneuvered. "Take the box and go," he shouted to his men. 2 bandits quickly cut free the strongbox containing the bait silver, securing it to one of their horses. As they prepared to flee, the leader grabbed Catherine, pulling her up against him as a shield. "Insurance," he snarled, pressing his gun to her temple. "Let her go, Denton," Easton's voice rang out. He had emerged from cover, his rifle aimed steadily at the bandit leader. "Drop your weapon, Xavier, or she dies," Denton replied. "You know I'll do it." Time seemed to slow for Catherine. She could feel Denton's ragged breathing, smell the tobacco and sweat on him. She saw Easton's face, taut with barely controlled fury and fear. And in that moment, she knew with sudden clarity what she needed to do. Her hand moved to her bag, fingers closing around the derringer. In one fluid motion, she pulled it free and fired into Denton's thigh. The bandit howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Catherine to twist away. Easton fired immediately, hitting Denton in the shoulder. The outlaw leader fell, his gun discharging harmlessly into the ground. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader down, fled with the strongbox exactly as planned. Thomas was already on horseback, following at a discreet distance. Easton rushed to Catherine, his hands gentle as they checked her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No," she assured him, though she was shaking with reaction. The others, one deputy was dead, the other wounded but alive. The rancher had taken a bullet in the arm, the driver was unharmed, and they had captured Frank Denton himself. "Your plan worked," Catherine said as they bound Denton's wounds tight enough to keep him alive for questioning. "Not my plan to have you taken hostage," Easton replied grimly. He hadn't let go of her arm, as if afraid she might disappear. They returned to Sloane with their prisoner and the grim news of one deputy's death. Denton was locked in the jail under guard, his wounds treated by Dr. Miller. The sheriff immediately began interrogating him about his accomplices in town. Catherine wrote the story of the ambush for a special edition of the Sentinel, though she kept back certain details at the sheriff's request. The town buzzed with speculation about who might have been working with the Denton gang. 3 tense days passed before Thomas returned with news. He had followed the bandits to an abandoned mine shaft several miles outside of town. There, he had observed a meeting between the remaining gang members and an unexpected figure, Judge Hollister. The judge, Sheriff Parker, was incredulous. "Are you certain?" "I saw him clearly," Thomas confirmed. He inspected the silver, paid the men, and left with the strongbox in his carriage. The pieces fell into place. The judge had regular business in the next county, giving him ample opportunity to smuggle stolen silver across jurisdictions. His position on the town council gave him access to shipping information, and his legal authority helped protect him from suspicion. With Thomas's testimony and Denton's eventual confession given in exchange for avoiding the hangman's noose, Judge Hollister was arrested. The search of his home revealed silver from multiple robberies and documents implicating him in a scheme to defraud both the mine and the government. The day after Hollister's arrest, Catherine found Easton packing his saddlebags outside the boarding house. "You're leaving," she said, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. "The danger's past," he replied, not meeting her eyes. "You'll be safe now." "That's not why I'm here." Catherine took a deep breath. "I wanted to thank you for everything." Easton nodded, still focused on his packing. "Just did what needed doing." "Is that all it was?" she asked quietly, his hands stilled. Finally, he looked at her, his expression unguarded for once. "No," he admitted, "that's not all it was." "Then why are you leaving?" "Because I don't belong here, Catherine, in town, among people. You belonged here these past weeks." Easton shook his head. "That was different. There was purpose." "And there can't be purpose without danger." Catherine stepped closer. "What about other reasons to stay?" Something flickered in his eyes, longing perhaps, but he turned away. "I've lived alone for years. It's what I know." "I think you're afraid," Catherine said boldly. "Not of danger, but of caring again, of letting someone matter to you." "Maybe I am," he agreed, his voice rough. "I've lost everyone I ever loved. It's easier to be alone." "Easier, yes, but is it better?" Catherine touched his arm gently. "I was alone too, in my way, surrounded by people but never truly seen, until I came here, until I met you." Easton looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want you to go," Catherine admitted. "I'm saying that in the midst of all this danger and mystery, something else happened, something unexpected." "Catherine," he began, but she shook her head. "You don't have to answer now, just don't disappear. Think about it." She turned to leave, her heart pounding with the boldness of her actions. She had nearly reached the street when his voice stopped her. "Catherine," she looked back. Easton stood there, looking more uncertain than she had ever seen him. "I'll stay," he said simply. "For a while longer." It was a small concession, but Catherine felt hope bloom in her chest. It was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, Sloane settled back into its routine. Though with Judge Hollister gone and the Denton gang scattered, there was a new sense of security. The newspaper thrived under Catherine's management, gaining subscribers and advertisers. Easton didn't return to his cabin in the wilderness. Instead, he accepted Sheriff Parker's long-standing offer to become a deputy. He claimed it was temporary, just until a replacement could be found for the man lost in the ambush. But weeks passed, and he remained. He and Catherine established a careful friendship. He would stop by the newspaper office most days, sometimes bringing coffee or a pie from Clara's bakery. They would talk about the happenings in town, debate ideas for articles, or simply enjoy each other's company in comfortable silence. Sometimes, Catherine would catch him looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch, as if he was seeing something precious and unexpected. But always he would look away, maintain the boundaries between them. Thomas, who visited town more frequently now, observed their dance with amusement. "Two more stubborn people I have never met," he told Catherine one day as he helped her carry a new printing press into the office. "He watches you like a man dying of thirst, eyes water, yet he will not drink." "Perhaps he's not thirsty," Catherine replied lightly, though her cheeks warmed. Thomas just laughed. "My friend has been thirsty for many years. He just forgot what it was to be quenched." Autumn arrived, painting the distant mountains in golds and reds. Sloane prepared for its annual harvest festival, a tradition that had grown with the town. Catherine threw herself into covering the preparations, interviewing townspeople and writing features about the history of the celebration. Easton found her in the office late one evening, surrounded by notes and half-written articles. "You missed supper," he said, placing a wrapped sandwich on her desk. "Did I?" Catherine blinked, suddenly aware of her hunger. "I lost track of time. You work too hard," she smiled. "Says the man who patrols from dawn until dusk." "Fair point." He pulled up a chair, watching as she ate. "The festival committee wants to know if you'll judge the pie contest." "Me? Why not Clara? She's the baker." "Can't judge her own pies," Easton pointed out. "Besides, they want to honor you. The town's been different since you took over the paper." "Better." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. Just speaking truth." His eyes held hers for a moment before he looked away, clearing his throat. "I also came to ask if you'd like to attend the festival dance with me." Catherine nearly dropped her sandwich. "As your guest, as my." Easton seemed to struggle for the right word. "Yes, as my guest, if you'd like." "I would like that very much," Catherine said softly. The Harvest Festival transformed the town. Main Street was decorated with bunting and harvest produce. Stalls sold everything from candied apples to handcrafted goods, and competitions ranged from pie baking to horse racing. Catherine spent the day moving between events, making notes for her coverage and fulfilling her judging duties. As evening approached, she returned to her rooms above the newspaper to prepare for the dance. She had brought few fancy clothes from Boston, but she had one special dress, a deep blue silk with delicate lace trim. As she arranged her hair and pinned a small cameo at her throat, Catherine admitted to herself how much this night meant to her. Easton arrived precisely on time, wearing a clean black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He had trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, and he carried a small bouquet of late wildflowers. When Catherine opened the door, He stared at her for a long moment before remembering to speak. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." She accepted the flowers with a smile. "You clean up rather well yourself, Deputy Xavier." The town hall had been transformed with lanterns, autumn decorations, and tables laden with food and drink. A small band played lively tunes, and couples already filled the dance floor. Catherine noted with amusement how many heads turned as she and Easton entered together. They were immediately swept into the festivities, greeting neighbors, sampling the punch, accepting congratulations on the capture of Judge Hollister and the Denton gang. Throughout it all, Easton remained close to Catherine, his hand occasionally touching the small of her back or her elbow, each contact sending warmth through her. "Would you like to dance?" he asked as the band began a waltz. "I would," Catherine replied, trying to calm her racing heart as he led her to the floor. Easton proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding her confidently through the steps. Catherine had danced at countless Boston society events, but never had it felt like this, as if she and her partner were moving as one, connected by something deeper than mere physical proximity. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Military balls during the war," he explained. "Officers were expected to participate. I discovered I didn't mind it, though I've had few opportunities since. You've been hiding your talents, Deputy." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Perhaps I was waiting for the right partner." The evening passed in a blur of dancing, conversation, and laughter. Catherine couldn't remember the last time she had felt so happy, so completely herself. As the celebration wound down, Easton suggested they step outside for some air. The night was clear and cool, stars brilliant above them. They walked slowly along the quiet street, neither speaking for a time. "Thank you for tonight," Catherine said finally. "I enjoyed myself tremendously, as did I." Easton hesitated, then offered his arm. She took it, moving closer to his warmth. They stopped in front of the newspaper office, reluctance evident in both their faces at the thought of the evening ending. "Catherine," Easton began, his voice low and serious, "these past weeks, they've meant a great deal to me." "To me as well," she admitted. "I came to Sloan to protect you," he continued, "but I've found something I wasn't looking for, something I thought I'd never find again." Catherine's heart pounded in her chest. "What did you find?" "A reason to stop running, a reason to—" He took a deep breath. "A reason to open my heart again." Gently, he took her hands in his. "I've lived alone for so long that I forgot what it was to share my life, to care deeply for someone, to fear losing them." "Is that what you fear, losing me?" Catherine asked softly. "Yes," he admitted. "But I've realized something. The fear of loss is nothing compared to the fear of never having loved at all." "Easton," Catherine whispered, emotion making it difficult to speak. "I love you, Catherine Sinclair," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I love your courage, your intelligence, your determination. I love the way you see the world with both clear-eyed truth and compassionate hope. I love who I am when I'm with you." Tears filled Catherine's eyes. "I love you too," she replied. "You walked into my life at exactly the moment I needed you, not just to save me from bandits, but to show me what it means to find home in another person." Easton gently released one of her hands to brush a tear from her cheek. Then, with infinite tenderness, he leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss of discovery and promise, of barriers finally lowered and hearts fully revealed. When they finally parted, Catherine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Easton said thoughtfully, "we build a life together." "If that's what you want." "It is," she assured him. "But what about your cabin, your solitude?" "I've discovered I don't need solitude anymore," he smiled down at her. Though I think you might enjoy the cabin, it's peaceful there. We could visit on weekends, perhaps, the best of both worlds." "I would like that," Catherine said, imagining quiet evenings by the fire, mornings waking to mountain views, all with Easton beside her. They were married the following spring in a ceremony that united the entire town. Thomas stood as Easton's best man, and Clara as Catherine's maid of honor. The Sentinel office was closed for the day, the only time it had missed an edition since Catherine took over. They divided their time between Catherine's rooms above the newspaper in town and Easton's cabin in the wilderness. Easton continued as deputy, eventually becoming sheriff when Parker retired. Catherine's newspaper thrived, becoming known throughout the territory for its honest reporting and compelling writing. Together, they helped Sloan grow into a town known for its fairness and community spirit. 2 years after their wedding, Catherine gave birth to their first child, a son they named James, after Easton's father. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later. The children grew up with the best of both worlds, the social connections of town life and the freedom and beauty of the wilderness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Easton took Catherine back to the spot where they had first met, near the overturned stagecoach. A small shelter now stood there, built for travelers in need of rest or protection from the elements. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been?" Catherine asked as they sat together, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls. "If the Denton gang hadn't attacked the stage that day, if you hadn't come riding to the rescue." "Sometimes," Easton admitted. "But then I remember something Thomas once told me. He said the spirits guide our paths, even when we think we're wandering." "I like that thought," Catherine said, leaning against his shoulder. "That somehow we were always meant to find each other. That you were meant to rescue me from those bandits. And you were meant to rescue me from a life of solitude," Easton added, wrapping his arm around her. "I was existing before I met you, Catherine, just moving through days. You taught me how to live again." "We rescued each other," she said softly, "and continue to do so every day." As the last light faded from the sky, they remained there, two souls who had found in each other not just love, but home. The wilderness around them was vast and sometimes dangerous, but together they had learned to navigate its challenges and celebrate its beauty, just as they had done with life itself. In the distance, the lights of Sloan began to twinkle like earthbound stars, calling them back to the community they had helped build and nurture. But for now, they were content to sit in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the wild country that had brought them together, two people who had found in each other the perfect balance of strength and tenderness, courage and compassion, adventure and peace.